dear-hearted city for me. My dad's a Chicago Blackhawks fan, so growing up, there's a lot of Ed Belfour and Jeremy Rowland in the house, and Chris Chelios. He played for Montreal, so happy to be back in the city. I know basketball might be a bigger sport, but like there's a little mini dynasty happening here in hockey with Chicago. We're talking about mobile, Xamarin, how to build mobile apps with Couchbase, but of course in the Xamarin platform. There's the New York. If you guys are happen to be in town, it's actually less than 21 days. It's October 6th. It's like our full day conference. It's like a Google I/O. It's like an Apple WWDC. I'm speaking there with two very technical, even more technical than what I'm presenting here now. It's pure code, essentially. There's some Bitly for here. You can register if yourself or team members are going to be in the area. Definitely recommend you to come. It's great. Our engineers are coming out. Our chief architect for mobile is going to be coming out. If you can't make it, it's okay. Rimas here is based in Chicago, so you can hit him up. We definitely have representatives here to answer questions and help you guys out. My name is William, so I'm a mobile engineer and developer advocate at Couchbase. I am strictly based on the East Coast. I'm based in New York. I do travel a bit. My background is electrical engineering, so I study a bit at McGill University over there. That's in Canada. You guys know who that is? It's Montreal. So I'm a huge Habs fan. You can hit me up at Sweetie Will. So I used to work at Twitter. They essentially let me pick any username, but I kept it as the original. My background, I started as a GPS embedded engineer at BlackBerry. Still use a BlackBerry, and I worked at Microsoft as a Windows Phone SDK engineer and developer advocate, 6.5 to 7.1. Then at Twitter as an ads partner engineer. So strictly mobile. Now I'm doing Couchbase Mobile. It's really cool stuff. So I want to share that with you guys tonight. NoSQL. Anyone here know what NoSQL is or heard about it? It's definitely still a new term, especially with mobile. I just want to talk about what that is and how it references us to mobile. There's basically, if you want to think about it, we're all hyper connected, right? So it means like, we're talking here, you might have your internet connected to your laptop, to your phone. Essentially, there's multiple connections all around, and mobile is one of the driving factors of it. It's basically delivering the right to your remote server. It's basically an entry point for all the user-generated content. You can think about it where you check in on Foursquare, you check in on Facebook, you make one tweet. Essentially, one explicit intent can garner you like 10 data points, right? One action, 10 data points. It's a lot of unstructured data altogether, and that's exploding all around. And traditionally, you have the traditional architecture facilitating something like that. And NoSQL is really driven by the industry players like Google, Amazon, Facebook, essentially trying to retrofit a lot of the experience and use cases that we have currently with web applications and mobile applications. So it really stem from there. And the trend is basically, we're trying to create more data, and how we're going to fit that data is basically the movement of a NoSQL movement. Why is that? Well, really quickly, if you guys are familiar with UML tables, this is very painful, right? So this is very trivial too. I've seen much bigger ones, but you can take a pivot point here and just pivot yourself to death. Mobile changes so quickly, right? Like the features itself, how things are related, how properties are associated with each other. Imagining something like this happening in production or on enterprise, it's not something I would feel like on the mobile side you can iterate really fast. And the equivalent of that is simply where you can take two of those tables, right, and simply flatten that down into a JSON file, right? We're talking key value storage. So over here, for example, if we look at what was previous, there was many tables. We just focus on two of them. There's no joins, right? There's no SQL query altogether. It's essentially all your business logic is in one particular file. You can just pull that out and reference it by key. And for iteration, for mobile, it's essentially really, really fast. And that's really why I feel, especially, I have a strong opinion on this, of course, where this is going with NoSQL and with mobile, where the trends are with IoT and wearables all together, it's going to make a huge change in your development mindset and in the life cycle altogether. Who is Couchbase? Well, we basically represent this space. So Couchbase, there's two products, right? There's a server side, which we're known for, what we're famous for. It's a NoSQL solution on the server, on the back end, remote. It's an open source company. There's a couple of projects that really fork on them, but two of the more famous ones, just Clouded that IBM purchased, and just Couchbase, which is our two business solutions for an open source Apache 2 license product. There's great players that's currently using Couchbase, mobile and server. I'll talk about that a bit more. But essentially, we have community contributions out and wide. We have pull requests that comes in. Everything that we work on, it's on GitHub. It's pretty cool. We pretty much work in the fishbowl. So all together, all the issues, all the roadmap planning, all the sprints, you could pretty much see on Waffle.io for mobile. On GitHub, you can actually report issues. If you're working on something that's Icebox for us, we definitely welcome and want you to contribute, and we actually put that into production for after review. So it's really purely Apache 2 license scenario. We follow the Red Hat Linux model. But what's cool is that you have companies like Disney. So if you ever go to Disneyland or Disney World, those magic bracelets that you check in with or beep on, what's driving that on the back end is essentially Couchbase. Some other companies are listed here that I can talk about. Apple uses us on their profile for iTunes. There's also Ryanair, which I'll talk about too, for mobile. Essentially, this is especially for a technology stack. I think it's important where if you want to bet yourself on your time and your resources, it's not something that's going dark on you. Essentially, all these players who are in mission critical use that have huge volume of users base are basically relying on us for scalability and for mobility. So just want to iterate that. But I think what's really key is there's a lot of technology out there, right? If you're mobile, you probably heard of companies like Firebase or companies that's doing a lot of the mobile SQL, NoSQL sync altogether. So why consider this? Well, the key thing as an engineer, right? Like I love building stuff in the basement, in the coffee shop, but in the end, it needs to solve a real life problem. So the business problem is actually very simple. Unfortunately, I think Chicago beats out New York in terms of horrible GPS experience. I don't know if you guys open your GPS lately. Yeah. Oh, first of all, the lat log is wrong. The time of estimation is absolutely off. I don't know, they got east and west all together wrong. Like I literally clicked on a link on Foursquare, it's supposed to be east, it directed me west. Well, that's unfortunate. Well, it's also cool because you have all these cool historic architecture that's disrupting all of that. New York is very similar. I think you guys have the baton as number one. New York might be number two for it. You ever tried driving around Chicago with your GPS? It's like you're burning battery out again. It's going haywire. Why am I talking about that? Because I think for a lot of product managers, UI designers, engineers, we design for the best case scenario, right? Which is that you're always connected. You always have a signal and things work out of the box. Unfortunately, that's not the case because essentially what we're used to is doing an HTTP REST request to content that's remote in the server. And this is my experience today in Chicago, right? Like I open Instagram, open Foursquare. I don't want to name names or brands, but essentially go open your favorite application in New York, Chicago, stadiums, whatnot. Network congestion is a factor, but this is the experience you get. Hopefully after a couple of seconds you have a positive experience, but today really after I would say a good 30 seconds I end up with something like this. This is unfortunate because it's basically an experience that doesn't exist. So it means that if you're a mobile developer, you're an app developer, you're an investor, you put a lot of resource and money involved into this, you essentially, all your content, all your experience, all the hard work you basically put in is living behind something that users can't experience altogether. But in the end, it's users that actually go and make a horrible rating on your app. From my personal experience, if this happens, literally just pull it out and rebrand it because there's a lot of algorithm involved in Google App Store or Apple Store. Altogether, you probably need 10 folds of good ratings just to par out something like this. And essentially, if you look at where all this stuff falls under, people complain about app freezing, app crashing, things don't work. These are all things related to network congestion or making a GET request to the remote server. This is something where, as an engineer or as a developer or designer, architect, excuse me, what I mean in design, is something you can create a solution for. You can basically have a fallback altogether. It's definitely not easy to do. One of the reasons is that you essentially need a local database, which I'll talk about, but it's something you as an architect or designer could definitely create a solution around altogether. But these are the three main factors if you look at app stores that have apps that have ratings, why people complain. These are the top reasons. And again, right, the data location is essentially that issue and that problem. It's somewhere remote in the cloud. You're dependent on a connection. You're dependent on Wi-Fi. You're dependent on a network. If it doesn't exist, essentially you don't have content, right? You can't render an image. You can't render text. You can't render the latest and greatest data that's relevant to your application. And the solution really is that hybrid solution, right? The hybrid solution is where who cares, right? Who cares if you have a connection or don't have a connection? You have a bucket, you have a database local to your device where you can basically do all your CRUD operations, your creates, your retrieve, your updates, your reads locally, right? It means that a user can essentially do something on their application, write it locally to their app, and if there is a scenario where you have a chance to sync it up, so be it. You write the logic to sync that upwards. And then when you have a connection, right, pull that down, pull any new content down if it exists. So that's a hybrid solution where, for example, if you took a huge video or a high resolution picture, right, if it doesn't have that network connectivity, you're on the airplane, for example, well, from a user's perspective, it's all done, right? It's like a 20 megabyte file could be like a 5 millisecond write. It's like, oh, it's blazingly fast, right? So that's what you can get overall with a local database. Apps feel fast. The users think it's done, right? But essentially it's working in the background thread. Or when you have connection, again, you can prompt the user to say like, hey, you actually connected. What do you want to do now? And it's less code altogether. And definitely from experience also, there's definitely use case experience. The apps itself on the App Store have a way higher rating altogether. So that's really the business problem, right? But if I really want to convey that all the hard work that you do in your application, if people can't experience it, then it's useless, right? Like it doesn't matter how clean the code is, how cool the features are, how cool the graphics are, the UX altogether, because essentially you're hidden behind the spinner altogether. So to me, offline is a feature in itself that enables all the other stuff to happen. So everything like, hey, you don't have a data connection, you don't have a network, you would never see the spinner because they just go local on disk, they just write it on disk. And then when you have a connection again, push that upwards to the server. So offline is a feature that enables everything else that we talked about. So that's a business problem, and Couchbase Mobile really solves that problem. So Couchbase Mobile is really a two-part solution. From a mobile standpoint, we're looking at Couchbase Lite, which is a library that lives inside your IDE, lives inside your project. Sync Gateway is that data proxy piece that does your data orchestration, how you want to basically distribute your data altogether. Mike talked about his application, his company that shows different groups of people, for example, that would be part of class that would basically be associated with sport or particular category. All that could be can be done logically on the Sync Gateway side. So two-part solution altogether. So I want to focus about Couchbase Lite. Couchbase Lite is a NoSQL solution. I'll do the demo in a bit just because I have more time in the background. So that's why I started about NoSQL. It's a document-oriented database. We're talking about keys and values, essentially JSON. Runs in process. So we're talking especially for Android, iOS, Xamarin's about in the 500 to 600 kilobyte range. So from an ROI perspective, your app will grow 500 kilobytes, but you're getting all these additional features like sync, your local database. How we do that is essentially the document itself is with versioning. I'll talk about that. So, and we provide MapReduce for us to do queries altogether. Event notification is abstracted out altogether. So essentially, you're writing UI and UX code. There's APIs in the background that you would listen for or fetch for that would determine if things are changed on the server side, and then you can render that accordingly to the UI thread. And then if you don't care about anything else, I think the one thing uh, that's really a value prop altogether is sync, right? We're talking master-master replication altogether. So if you ever written essentially if you ever work with Wireshark or things with like packet passing altogether, that's abstracted out for you. So essentially you're doing programmatic API calls to the backend and to the mobile database to determine if things have changed, if there's a new revision, because we're talking about a document-oriented database that has versions. So that leads us into what this is. So what it is essentially is it's a collection of key value pairs as your database, and it has versioning. So for us, we maintain all that versioning. I think a lot of the products out there, especially for mobile, it's on the basis of last premise wins. So for us, we can actually keep an entire revision tree. Anytime we do a CRUD operation, we actually have a new revision that generates on the back end. And then that gives us some of the cool features like conflict resolution I'll showcase in a bit. Schemaless, I say that with a grain of salt because anything in production has some structure or schema altogether. But you can see with a NoSQL JSON structure, if things change, if like let's say an object grows and needs a new property, you don't have to scratch your head and look at that UML table to see like, hey, where does it belong to? You don't have to do something like a SQL Rails diagram, like, hey, you have to flow through this channel, break it out, and then turn that into like Android code or like whatnot. Might talk about SQLite. Just plug it into your database, right? It's just keys and values all together, so you can have nested values. And because of that, you can code really fast. That's really cool because essentially you're talking about like, hey, that feature doesn't belong there. That property doesn't belong to that object. Plug it out, put it somewhere else, delete it. It don't matter. You don't have to basically do another join on the table just to get that one property and query it. So because of that, it's really cool. What that looks like for those folks who are not familiar, this is essentially a JSON, right? Keys and values. This itself is an object. So you have a type that's value session. You can have multiple types. If it doesn't equate to the one you want, then you would never go in and query or pull out the session property. So for example, this one is object type and it's session 001. And for example, my location, I'm based in New York, I'm in Brooklyn previously. Well, my hometown is Montreal, but you can have that as nested. If it gets too nested, you can actually pull that out and have like current location. You don't need an array. It could just be a key that says current location, just be a 01 read, order one altogether. So that's really cool. And you can iterate really fast. So this is what a JSON NoSQL database looks like for us here. And what's really cool is that, like I said, you can have nested properties, nested value, change things accordingly, features change, add it, take it away, add and modify it accordingly. MapReduce, I want to talk about this a bit. This lets you build your indices, and thus you can query in your native language altogether. You don't need to switch over to another programming language, for example, like SQL here. So, like I said, you just set breakpoints in your IDE. Lets you basically build your indexes for fast querying altogether, and allows for queries across large data sets. So that's a huge advantage because you can do that in your native code, in your IDE, you can just set breakpoints. You don't have to have another application to look at your data set, look at your database. It's really powerful. Again, it reduces the whole cycle of like tests and debug and code. Essentially, you're just doing it all in one space. Event notification, we'll talk about this, lets you listen to and observe for changes on the database side. So you can do this on the database level, the query level, the replicator level, even at the document level. Just a tremendous amount of logic code that gets cut down altogether because essentially you're writing callbacks, right? You're writing a separate thread, and in the background, you can basically determine, hey, things have changed. Update something or render that to the UI, as opposed to doing always paying the server, asking if that's new stuff. you can save a lot of compute resources and CPU resources altogether. And the key thing I feel like that made me say wow, essentially I did a lot of Bluetooth testing, is sync. Full master-master replication. What this means is that mobile is not a secondary citizen. Mobile is not a primary citizen. Essentially, mobile itself is master, and what you have on the cloud is master. So we're talking about eventual consistency. This is exactly what we're referring to. Essentially, what your device or what one user will have on their device as input or output, or gets rendered according on their screen, and what lives in the database, you will also have that across all different users. You just have to write the logic to determine which users get that data set altogether. So I'll talk about that in a bit. Continuous and ad hoc, because you can basically have a socket open, just like a chat application. Chat deals with pretty much high frequency, low bandwidth, or low payload. It's expensive because you just always have to have that channel or port open altogether. Or you can attach sync programmatically to an explicit or implicit intent. For example, on app exit, right? On app exit, you want to basically take everything that's local to your phone and push it up to the cloud. Or on app start, you basically want to say, hey, now I'm in this application, go and fetch, go and pull, do a get call to anything that's remote, anything that's new, bring that down locally. So you can do that ad hoc, right? So it depends what your scenario, what your use case, what your application is. You can do that with Couchbase and with Sync. And because of all that stuff, what's cool is that conflict resolution is handled all together. So we keep a revision tree. So if you basically have multiple users writing into the same key, and there's basically a clash or a conflict, it's like I said, it's not based on one user wins over the other. We actually predetermine as default a winner, but you as the app developer can go back and traverse that tree and pick out a winner or merge the values of a particular key. So that's really powerful altogether. For us, I think what's interesting is that it's cross-platform. You can get this on CocoaPods if you're an iOS developer. If you're Android, I pretty much live in Maven Central. NuGet, what probably most of the crowd here are familiar with. Packet distribution in Xamarin. If you really want to build from source, it's open source, right? I've gotten this down to like 430 kilobytes because you just put out features you don't need on GitHub. We have a Unity support. So for Couchbase, there's 4 .NET runtimes. We support Mono, we support Xamarin, we support Unity, Microsoft.NET. We support PhoneGap, Ionic, all the desktop you can think of, Windows, Mac, desktop itself. So when I say mobile, I don't really just mean like the stuff you hold on your device, on your hands. Essentially, all client-side devices, desktop included, is supported, which is pretty cool. Someone built the Evernote clone using Couchbase. It's called Frontlog. You can look it up. It's on the Mac App Store. So on mobile and on desktop, I can show this too at the end. It's pretty cool. They essentially, what we represent is like the Evernote engineering team. I think they have like 20 engineers that's dedicated to sync and cross-platform. For us, we're creating that feature. It doesn't matter what kind of app you're building. You can just integrate, plug in that library, and you get sync, you get conflict abstracted out altogether. So you can just focus on your core business development. Open source wise on the web, there's also PouchDB. It's a JavaScript library. It's pretty cool. So they basically forked Sync Gateway. So I'll talk about that in a bit. Sync Gateway, again, is that, so remember there's 2 parts to the solution. You got your local side that's in the IDE. The Sync Gateway is basically dealing with the data orchestration. To basically fork that, put that into their repo. So you got a JavaScript library that can sync upwards to the cloud using this proxy provided by Couchbase. Sync Gateway, like I mentioned, does the authentication and authorization piece for you. For us, we have Facebook outright done as an example, but essentially we support basic pluggable authentication altogether. So you can just write your own stack or LDAP altogether, put that in, authenticate, and go through Sync Gateway. That's how you would validate a user. Essentially, it's determining which user can get read or write access or both. How that looks like across the stack, right? You got your left-hand side, you've got your IDE that has that project, that has Couchbase library embedded inside your project. The right-hand side, it's our server. So we don't do hosting. You put that anywhere you want to put it. I personally have it on DigitalOcean. I have on AWS, so I felt some pain over the weekend. I don't know if you guys felt that personally. But essentially, for the demo I'm going to run, I have it locally here. So on the Couchbase Lite site, you can actually run it on Raspberry Pi. It's essentially, for us, if anything's J2SE compliant, like a Linux box or whatnot, we have that outright supported. So it's pretty cool. Instant gateways, that data orchestration piece. You write some JavaScript function that determine which users will get what kind of data. I think I mentioned Mike that's doing the sports app experience. So something like this, right? You can create some channels. Which users can be validated for what channels? So think about it like in an organization. Your intern can basically get read access, but can't get write access. And then you can give them access by putting in an array, for example. So channels is one thing you would associate a particular user with inside Sync Gateway. So this is one way we can provide some security or provide some data slicing and whatnot. We support TLS on the transport, so SSL on the transport altogether. I think in Q4 for security and encryption, you provide us with a key and basically encrypt that data for you. So that's one way we can do some encryption and validation altogether. While I talk about this, I'm not going to demo this. I can definitely show something that's not Xamarin based later. We're traditionally known to have that kind of scenario on the left-hand side. Essentially, you have a parent, you have a child. Essentially, let's say if I want to share a picture of you guys, I have to go up to the server, and you guys have to go fetch it, right? But if I can't connect to the server, none of you will have that picture that I want to share. For Couchbase Lite, on the client side, we have a listener, an HTTP server altogether abstracted out. So essentially, we're removing the parent node, and I can basically do peer-to-peer connection and sharing all that together. It's pretty cool. Our fallback is just Bluetooth or the same network altogether. So at least we can do some peer-to-peer experiences. If I can talk about it, some things you can see, for example, in the stadium, in the baseball stadium, or the football stadium, you have a lot of people basically on their phone taking pictures. If they're on NFL, MLB, streaming these videos, and those live experiences really harsh. But if one person has content on their phone, they can basically populate anyone around them. So what that looks like from a topology standpoint essentially is a mesh network. Essentially what it means that if one person has the content, they can basically distribute it across anyone that's around them versus somebody that's going to be, hey, everyone doing a GET request for the content. Why do that when someone sitting next to you already has that picture, has the string or the content altogether just shared across each other? So you can write validation code, UI code to render that accordingly. But what's cool is that if network fails or one node or one edge breaks, you don't have to basically have zero experience. Again, back to the spinner, you can basically have a full experience if one person has the content. And again, it saves bandwidth and it's a ROI plus for your application altogether. Some apps out in the wild I can talk about. All of these are across Google App Store, Apple Store. I can go 4 pages deep, 4 rows across of all the different apps that's using them. So you got Clue. Clue is a women's health application, and you got Ed transportation, Frontlog. You got another health application, Ryanair. Scoremore is using the PhoneGap stack for it. CNET is pure native. It's kind of like a Vine and Instagram clone based in the UK. Essentially, for them to get to their MVP product, they basically, instead of hiring like 10 engineers dedicated to do database and sync, they just basically leverage us. So that's what we're looking for. For Ryanair, I want to talk about this and actually show you something really, really cool. I want to show a video. There's volume. I don't think I have volume. But you can see on the left-hand side, essentially, is the application not having Couchbase or not having a local database. On the right side, it's retrofitted with Couchbase Mobile. The bottom, you can see is the timeline of the progression of the user experience. So this is, Ryanair is much like an airline app. For those who travel to Europe, you might have heard of them. They would be equivalent like a JetBlue in North America or Southwest in North America. But their app itself in the App Store, if you look at the historic ratings and reviews, was unfortunate. So they were looking for a solution from all the customer feedback. You can see the spinner just going round and round and round. While on the right-hand side, you can see that there's an experience that's being cached and persisted locally. So that's really cool. A lot of user data that got generated when they're in the application can be persisted. And then when they have a connection, they can go up the wire again. Versus the left-hand side, you can see just based on the timeline here down underneath where they are in the progression. So I think previously it took about 5 to 6 minutes from like beginning to end to look up a ticket, book a ticket, pick a seat, and they got that down to like around 2 minutes time just by retrofitting it with Couchbase as a library, as a database level. They're not changing any features, they're not changing any user experience of the flow or getter. They're just simply caching data that's already been retrieved or whatnot. So for example, like there's some of these images, those C images, if you kill the application, you open again, they have to basically go up the wire, do another get call to basically populate that versus on the right-hand side, if you already did that, just read that off locally. So that's a huge plus on their gain. I think after they put that into production, I think 2 weeks later, you can see the app reviews actually go up tremendously. So I think that's one of the use cases for mobile that's available to talk against. I want to show a demo right now. Let me go here. So what's happening here is I already have Couchbase server running, so I can show that. It's one of these. It's too many. See, I got Couchbase server running in the background. So this is a development environment. I'm just doing this locally. It's listening on port 4984. I'm going to start 2 separate instances here. So this is just a sample app that's using Couchbase Lite. So it's just to show the features and the features I talked about with a local database, with sync, and of course conflict resolution. So you can see it's 2 separate images. This one is device 1. This is device 2. Open this up. You can see, like, from an image standpoint, this is image 36. But basically, it's 2 separate instances. This is 67. Both have been authenticated by Facebook. So what that means, if I click share, very much like the app that Mike was showing me, you can have a bunch of existing users in a database or in a channel, but it's up to the user to explicitly authenticate or pick another user they want to share against, right? So over here, I have this experience shared against, of course, myself, Zen. I think there's another one. Nope. If I click here, you can see share. This one is shared against William, Zen. So basically, these 2 are in this channel. They're communicating across from each other. So what this is happening is that there are 2 separate applications referencing one database or one URL endpoint, and I'm in Chicago, so go Hogs. So eventual consistency, right? So what this means is that when I type that in on the left-hand side, it was persisted locally on one device. It's slow. Could be Wi-Fi. This could be on the wire, up or down, whatnot. You can packet read that, determine where that bottleneck is. But you have that eventual consistency that comes down onto another application. All that code is abstracted out. All that logic is done by us, by Couchbase. For example, say go to the right-hand side, if I toggle this, you can see, hopefully, it comes up on the other side. You want to update this. Can't believe Hawks are winning everything. Like Go Habs, Montreal. Do updates too. We can this here. What's Hawks' biggest rival? Boston? Huh? Red Wings?
Red Wings, well, used to be St. Louis now.
Lose. Right? You can like delete it. It'd be deleted. Detroit. So Octo, their name. They like to shoot octopuses on the arena. Let's take a see if I have the name of camera on. Webcam. Take a picture. Okay. You can see it comes over on the side. What's really cool is I feel like it's the offline experience. So let's say I go on airplane mode, update this. Florida likes to shoot rats on their rink. Scott Mendelby used to do that. You guys are hockey fans. So you see that this never got updated because we're on airplane mode. This doesn't have Wi-Fi connection. But this is local. This one's local, but it's also synced to the server. When I get off the airplane, right, or have connection again, if I'm not in downtown like Chicago, you see this experience eventually come in. You can definitely force it, right? So this I have a replicator attached to on app start. So on app start, I basically want to pull. See, I pull that on app start. So this was already fetched in the background, and yeah, I can create timers. I can create listeners. I just force it to see that. I think another cool thing is conflict. So if I do this and decide to update, oh, Chicago. This one I can update accordingly too. Oh, New York. So this one is local and also synced up to a remote database in the cloud. Where over here is just local to my device. This is my server, so to say. And then if I go online again, what's really cool is that we basically have two different writes into the same parent and the same node altogether. But over here, we basically have a Boolean that we reference on the server side. It's basically an API on Couchbase that we listen to. True or false, it returns true if there's a conflict. For example, if there is a conflict, what was before, I think it was Octo halves, right? Chicago wrote across on top of Octo halves as a value, and then Chicago over here, I think the capital O also got written on top. So if you think about it, like you have your parent node, you have two leaves that spun from it. Traditionally, well, not traditionally, across some of the solutions, you will never see the other leaves or the other edges. It's just the last person that wrote into it on top of it. Think of it like a one level stack, right? You can pop that, you never see the other stuff I got written into it. For us, you can basically query it. So over here, even though Couchbase provides a default winner, you can basically go and retrieve that, see what that entire list is. So for example, yeah, there's New York, there's Chicago. Thank you for giving me a winner, but it was actually New York, right? So I could pick New York as a default winner altogether. So once that's done, any updates accordingly. For us, this logic, we can write starting from the old New York branch. Think of it like Git. Or you can just merge New York and Chicago altogether. So that's really powerful, I think, for us with Couchbase. Essentially, you can get that opportunity to do a lot of the database syncing on the back end altogether. And then, of course, you can delete it. So,
the one side know which users are logged into the database, but at the same time, who's actually online and
yeah. So the question is, can one user determine if another user is logged in, right? Right. So for this example, it's just an open database. and we authenticate a user using Facebook OAuth. Once they're authenticated, it doesn't mean they can get access, right? This person needs to basically, for example, create a list. So I'll create a list that says Chicago. So here's a Chicago list. If you look at here, there's Boston, there's Chicago, it's local. But if you look at this one, there's Boston, there's no Chicago, right? But because both of them got authenticated on the same database using Facebook, I'm able to now share this particular list to this user. Presume it's this person. Could be wrong, right? I don't know if this. So you can write some UI code that shows who this person is. I forgot who I authenticated this person to be. And then if I kill the application, essentially the answer to your question is yes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you know that they're online, or do you have to set a field to be like a watchdog?
you can set a field, or you can query explicitly, like just go and see if the person is there or whatnot, or if there's someone you want to be there, you can have that alerted. It just depends on the logic you want to write on your server side altogether. But in terms of sharing a database, sharing an experience, it's absolutely possible using something like this. I might not have shared it to the right user, of course. So let's say I looked at James A, B, C, D. Yeah, I forgot what I logged in with this with. But you know what I mean, right? So, of course, you need to share, once users log in, you need to share it across to the person you want to have that same experience as well. Let's go back to the presentation. Did I answer your question? Or yeah, cool. So that was the demo that kind of glossed over, skipped over a couple of slides ago. Next step, we'll talk about Xamarin. I think I have like maybe 20, 30 minutes left. So Xamarin is really, what is it? It's basically an IDE that you develop in for mobile in particular. It has its own compilers for iOS and Android. The platform itself, from an architecture standpoint, if I can talk about this a bit, the user interface contains the screen, control, the data presentation code. In iOS, these classes are basically wrappers around the iOS Cocoa Touch framework. The user interface that you build looks and feels pretty much like a native iOS application. It feels like Objective-C, basically. At the app layer, in either platform, essentially, we're talking about custom classes here. We're talking about ways you can bind your business layer to the user interface. Typically, oops, what happened here? Excuse me. Typically, it's basically platform specific features altogether. Your core library down under, this is all the Xamarin stuff. So you got your business object classes inside the business layer. You got your abstraction layer between business logic and data logic. Low-level persistence and retrieval, that's happening at the data level. So I'll talk about that a bit. For us, it's actually very simple. I'll reference the Android solution, but it works across iOS and Android. Open your Xamarin IDE for those who's using Xamarin here. Just curious. I'm happy. Okay. So yeah, just pop in a new solution. What you would do for me, it would be choosing C# or Xamarin application, name your application, location, whatnot, your solution. Inside your project array, go right-click, go to Add, get NuGet package. Essentially, type in Couchbase Lite in your search field. It'll be the first one that pops up. We're pushing out 1.1 already, so if you have a later version, latest and greatest version, just click Add Package. You see a bunch of stuff happening in your console. Definitely wait for the log that says successful from there. What else? Open up the packages. What you should see is a bunch of the stuff that downloaded here. Couchbase Lite is written on top of SQLite. We're abstracting that altogether. We're going with a database called ForestDB. It's an open source project that's developed in-house by Couchbase. Better, more powerful, fits with our architecture where we want to go on the back end too. So our back end is written in Go. So I can talk about that in a bit too if you'd like or ask me offline. But essentially you have those four pieces to reference against. And you can update it, right-click update to update all four accordingly. And what you should see is, you got your namespace, your activity here on the bottom. It's just a blank project, whatnot. You can reference with Couchbase with the using statement. So what I could do, given time, essentially you can take this link down. I can talk about this in a bit. There's an online tutorial on how to basically integrate Couchbase Mobile into an application, like a sample application. So essentially in 30 to 45 minutes, you have a local database that has local persistence and can sync that upwards and pull that down from a remote server. If you don't grab it now, it's fine. I'll post it in the meetup.com link as well. In the night or early tomorrow, do that. So I want to walk through this a bit. How this works for Couchbase is actually some code. For us, you basically reference a manager class. The manager class is Couchbase's almighty object. Pass in a string value. If it exists, great, you're referencing that particular database. If it doesn't exist, you're basically creating a database. So of course, you have some using statements. I'm not talking about here, but using Couchbase Lite. Once you brought that in, essentially for you to create a database is one line of code. Manager is Couchbase, shared instance is Couchbase, get database is also Couchbase. If it returns null, we're basically creating a kitchen sink database programmatically here with the variable _db. We're going to create some views. So this is how we do our queries. Essentially, for us here, we're looking at date time as a particular key that we want to query against. So anytime a document gets created, systematically it has a date time key, whatnot, generated. So we're creating a view across the date time property of a document altogether, and we're emitting that, and so we can index and query accordingly. So this is code for it, and this is all referenced inside that bit.ly link or GitHub link with the tutorial. For us here, we start a live query. So just like a regular query, live query basically lets you filter and order the index we created in the previous step altogether. So live query can send us results that appear later, even after we have already iterated through the results. This is one way to basically form the UI layer if anything has changed. You can get the callback that's essentially with the task object. So that's what's happening here. When we do an update, the UI will get updated. We need to basically save tasks. So in the example application, it's like a to-do application, to-do light example. So over here, the code to save task, we basically added or updated from the UI layer, while the logic is basically very similar to both. For new documents, the put property method needs to be called. So the put property method is essentially how we can persist items to disk, and it's basically used for updating the task. The update method needs to be called as well. The new task object will have not only the ID property here that was set initially, but it will always be distinguished between two use cases by using the revision ID as well. So we basically put that in a method altogether. So for example, you can reference a particular ID, get that back, if it exists. You can update that accordingly with .update. You put that into the database because we do the method get document, you're referencing the database. So the document itself is associated to the database that you created initially on the first line of code. To delete documents, very simple, right? You just reference a particular object ID or task.id. If you get that, great. You have that populate in a variable doc. Of course, if it's not null, there's some content in there, just go and delete it. You can delete it. You can also purge it. Purge means, like, for example, just you don't want to render it to the UI, just kind of like leave it out. Deleting it is actually deleting it off the database altogether. Remember, like I said, any CRUD operation has a new revision ID that gets generated, so you can query against that new revision ID. So once we have the data, that's great. How do you inform the UI is another thing. So on Android, this involves setting up some adapter property here on the list view that displays the data. So that's what we're doing in those 2 lines of code. The kitchen sink list adapter here on the first line, where you instantiate new kitchen sink list adapter, is pretty much responsible for this. You set that up. If you need to create it, go ahead and basically reference that. And you basically, you can add the following as the body, as the init item adapter method in the main activity, I believe. So this is where you'll put the code. If you're lost a bit, it's definitely fine. So I go through on a high level what are some steps you need to do. But it's all referenced in the bit.ly link. What's happening here? This is like the checkbox number of the application show. So where you toggle a checkbox on an item. Essentially, when a user taps on a row in the list view, you're adding the following to the onClick method altogether. So reference that to the save task method. For deletion, long pressing is one way to do for Android. So we'll implement the following on the on item click method. So this is the logic for it. Once it's long press or held, you want to send a message to the user if you want to actually delete it or actually no. It goes on 2 separate branches, 2 separate tabs, and then of course you do alert.show to give some UI element to the user. So that's all cool. That's all local, right? But to add sync, essentially you're providing an endpoint. You're providing one endpoint. You're providing multiple endpoints. Essentially, it's a URL endpoint that you want to reference. So for us here, it's just my local IP and then a particular port. Slash afterwards is just a database I want to reference that I want to sync against. So this is essentially how you would reference an endpoint that you want to sync to or push your data to and from. And just write some logic across of it, right? So over here, some try catch statement in terms of like if it's available to push, if it's you can do some parsing or UML string formatting, and you're doing some fallback into push and pull, referencing mobile first perspective. A pull is essentially mobile pulling from the server. Push is mobile pushing data to the server. And you're referencing some Couchbase APIs, database dot create pull replication. Create that object with the string parameter URI that we defined in the previous slide. So when you do pull dot continuous equals true, that's like a socket, right? Or false, that's fine. But either way, when you do pull dot start, you basically start the replication to have that. For example, you have it on the background thread listening if you like. If you want to push that off to a background thread, or you can have it as an ad hoc scenario that on app exit, right? Put that in a function, whatnot, and then call this particular snippet. And like I said, all that's left to do is basically call the method at the appropriate time. So for Android, you put this in like an onCreate. That's where when application starts, it would be in the onCreate. Well, think of it like main in Java. That's where it would be. Yeah, just build it, run it. I'll put the link up again, but essentially, that's how in like 9 to 11 steps you get a local database on Xamarin that syncs. It's really fast. I talked about this in a bit. So essentially, this is referencing again. Remember that local host. That's sync underscore URL. It's just a variable I define as a string, as a first slide. So populating that, pushing that in, then calling start sync. I'm actually syncing or listening on that endpoint. So anytime there's new stuff that happens on that database or that side, write logic, write UI code to determine, hey, there's stuff. Great. You want to time out? You want to sync it immediately? You want to send an email to the user? You want to do a toast notification? All that stuff is just you defining logic for. I'll put this also on the meetup page, but if you want to take it down now, you definitely can. This is stuff I talked about. The mobile portal, essentially I live in that, and the developer forums on the bottom if you have questions. So the features that Disney get or Apple, eBay, PayPal, you're not getting any features that's less or more. Essentially, under our #1 revenue stream is support. So they have a dedicated person that's associated with them. But for us, the mobile engineers and myself, we live on the forums, pretty much answering questions that you guys have. So it's a great resource too. The bit.ly link is where I referenced some of the code I talked about, how to get started. Developer portal itself is where the API and sample apps you can get a lot of this stuff from. Couchbase Live, again, that's a bit.ly if you're in New York. Let's just show this since I have a bit of time. Doing some React stuff. So, for mobile, it looks like this. You go and develop. Got some stuff. I've actually personally handwritten these and put these in as training, so you can take a look at building your first Couchbase Lite on Android. For us, I think in this crowd be with Xamarin. So performing CRUD, adding sync, how to do your live views, go through that. I'd say a good an hour investment you can get up and running with code. You go to support, blogs. Let's do this. Let's do this now. So I have a blog ready. So I'm gonna publish this now. Publish. If I hit refresh, that's me. There you go. It's live. So you can literally see how to do some C# stuff with Unity, with games also that I talked about with Couchbase. Pretty cool. You can get up and running and see how Couchbase can sync or store player data locally and then sync it across to a remote endpoint. So that's live, yeah. And the forums I talked about a bit too. Where's the forums, community forums, mobile, right? Yeah, it's me answering questions. But yeah, that's some of the resources. If you want to hear about some of the stuff that I've heard of Viber before. Yeah. Yep. It's like a Skype. Very big in Southeast Asia, like India and Japan. Rakuten bot. Viber Asia is really big with this. So if you actually want to read up like why Viber switch from Mongo to Couchbase, that's another interesting thing to look at. So I spent a good 2 years wasting a lot of resource and time and bandwidth to solve scalability issues. I just had enough with it. So yeah, that's my presentation. Happy to answer some questions for those who are online too. But I want to bring this link up again, and you can hit me up. That's me. Pretty active on Twitter. So you got some local rep here too.
Some of the questions I have is when you obviously using this cloud base, if you submit information just from the simple apps I saw you create, it looks like you send it went through. where instead of getting an error message, they put send
Sure.
because of lack of data connection. When a person sends something, there are certain applications that they want to see that it has been received or the transaction has gone through. Obviously, wouldn't you want to develop apps that are to indicate that it's been put on a stack if there is no data connection? Obviously, I don't look at the signal strength or anything. I just send and expect the other person to see it. Just from your example, you sent, but there was no indicator whether the other person could see it or not.
Right.
It's just putting them.
Yeah, you can develop. So the example app, I'm not handling those particular use cases, but all the APIs and logics there for you to basically render. So for example, I can have a pending logo or symbol that's like red, or if I actually push that off to the cloud, it can be yellow because I've never got a indicator back from the server that said all users have been have the latest data, whatnot. But that's all possible.
Yeah.
That's all possible. I just didn't create a UI for it.
It's kind of like Facebook. I see their little
Sure,
picture
seen it.
drop down to the message indicating that they see it now.
Yep.
Or they're just reading it now.
Absolutely.
That's a perfect example.
That's UI code, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The logic or the API for you to create that is just abstracted out. So it'll be up to you to now to determine when and where to do a drop down and do like a pop up or do like a color switch or just do a binary like this handle like a check mark or uncheck mark or something like that. Yeah, it's absolutely possible. I just didn't showcase. It's not showcased here, but it's absolutely possible. Hey.
How is Couchbase different from Firebase? What's the major difference between the two?
One major difference is we don't provide hosting. So if you go on the question is Firebase and Couchbase. Firebase, you pay a premium for how many users and how many uptime you have. So for us here, you'd be paying probably like your hoster, where you want to put it on or where you want to host it. If you have your own server in your basement, then you're just paying energy bill. On the technology side, one of the biggest differences is simply like I showed with Conflict. They're great for chat applications because they don't have anything like what I show where we keep an entire revision tree. So anytime, like I said, there's a conflict, it doesn't matter who wins or who loses, whatnot. We actually keep that whole history there for you to query and pull from Firebase. Meaning that if let's say your location is Chicago, so a key location, the key is named location, the value is Chicago, and then I wrote on top of you to be Montreal. Then your friend next to you decides to write New York. But anyone that reads the particular property location never sees Chicago as an entry, would never see Montreal as an entry. It would just show the latest and greatest. Think of it like I said, like a stack. You just pop up one stack, the item on the first stack. You never see anything else. So it's like to summarize, it's just on the premise of last red wins. So for us, there's that use case that you can keep a winner, or you can just have the user decide like what you should do for conflict. Like for example, Google Docs or Evernote. Imagine everyone's modifying the same sentence or modifying the same paragraph. With us, we can basically showcase like who's modifying what or changing what, and then determine what you want to show or render as the correct sentence versus like, hey, let's roll the dice and see like who comes out last, because the last one will win. That's the major difference. There's also architectural differences I can get into, but I'll speak offline to you about that.
One more question. So I have had a bad developer review because I had Synchronized on my app, and it was storing a lot of data offline. So I had someone script review that okay, this app is doing something spurious, it's storing a lot of data, and that's why they give us bad ratings. So how much data offline you recommend we put on our apps before and be transparent about it?
Sure. The question is, what is the type of scenario or bandwidth you need to provide locally for your application to store data? It really is a use case scenario, to be honest, because if you're doing a lot of historical reads, for example, let's say Instagram, right? Instagram, the value there is that people like the latest and newest pictures, you probably won't go back 2 weeks old to look at a picture that's 2 weeks old. Messes up ad targeting, and that messes up a lot of things. So you have to write a logic or a scenario that will say, yeah, you actually looked at something 2 weeks old, but you could write a logic where it deletes things that's 1 week. Yeah, you just delete it off your device. So for Couchbase, right, for us, there's no limit in terms of like how big that local database on your phone is or on your desktop is. It's up to you to decide where it's depending on how big your disk space is. You can allocate the entire hard drive to your application. Of course, it's not recommended, but even so, like if you already downloaded a movie or you buffered a movie, you could write a logic where, yeah, the person never clicked play on that movie for the past 6 months. Delete it off, right? So it's very use case driven. I can't say what's the best scenario. If you're doing things that users frequently go on the wire, doing an HTTP GET call for again and again for the same thing, like for example on an app there, like the app icon that's on load, it's every single time, you can just keep that local, right? That 10 kilobyte would never go on the wire to do a GET, right? It's just why do it? Because you already have it. It's already fetched and saved and persisted. Just read it off this. But for new content, of course, you should always go on the wire for it. Amen.
So, one of the network architecture was how the sync couch server, client, what is like the sync database gateway
Sure.
server? So, like how long? It seemed from your demos, but
It's all dependent on even weather, right? The question is, what is some of the fast and long times we've seen with sync gateway and syncing? Depends what you're syncing, depends how big of a file or a database you're syncing. Depends on your network connectivity. We're fortunate with John and the group here that we have Wi-Fi with good signal, so we can sync really fast. But the key thing with sync is just master. You eventually have that consistency across all your client devices. Of course, like there needs to be some architecting in terms of like you don't want to just data dump the entire database at one shot, right? You should write some logic against that of like how you would data slice that this scenario across like that logic versus like yeah, here's an open pipeline. It's just dump like a whole gig, right? But it's really use case dependent, network dependent.
let me just ask this question. In a controlled environment, where, for example, the sync gateway is with the couch gateway server, that sync time is fairly fast.
It's fast.
So I guess what's the latency it introduces?
I need to get back to you if you want specific benchmarks. It's just fast. Yeah. Depends how many documents you're syncing down. Depends on if there's new docs or if there's things that already got written in the database. It varies. Absolutely varies. But if it's just a pure database syncing down, it is fast. And yeah, definitely speak on your use case more. But
So you talk about the server version as well, right? CouchDB has a server edition as well. So is it available for integrated with the Azure cloud hosting or something? Host a CouchDB server on Azure?
I believe there's an instance that you can do that. I forgot where. If you link to it, and if you want to play around some of the Amazon images, we have AMI image too. You just click your whole couple of buttons, a T1 micro instance gets spinned up for you as well. Or you can just put it in your own box, but it's supported.
Well, presumably it runs on Windows Server.
Yes.
So push comes to a shove, you just use a virtual machine in the Azure cloud and install it yourself.
Yeah.
Is there any enterprise licensing we need to require if we want to utilize?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and Remus could speak more directly on that with you.
There's enterprise licensing, and it's just depending on your SLA. Gold, platinum for P1 response times, silver support. So, but yeah, there's an enterprise license which allows you to run it in production.
You have a community license or a community one and twelve.
Community edition, that's
Open, so it's open.
Yeah.
Let people learn and experiment.
yeah, it's you're not going to have the latest release of some things, as well as cross data center replication. Does not include that from a server standpoint, but outside of that, it allows you to play around with the software.
So, was there another hand up, or I'm going to stick around? So, hey, Mike.
Admin tools,
Admin tools.
web admin or desktop admin such?
Absolutely. So on the server side, you can definitely there's a web port you can look at. You can literally see a bunch of stuff going up and down. How your reads and writes are basically coming through. You set your database cluster and bucket all together from there. There's stuff coming too in the pipeline, support for mobile as well. But essentially, you can use any like glorified curl tool. You can see your GET requests, and you can see your JSON being populated. I personally use Paul. I don't know if you've heard of something like that, but you can just do it in terminal as well. But yeah. Hey, John.
Is there a way to sync the backend Couchbase server to like a SQL server or another non-relational database?
Yeah, actually, a lot of people use Couchbase Server as a cache. So they front load it depending on what their current architecture or solution is. A lot of people are using it in front of a Oracle database as well. You definitely get faster read times. So, for example, if I can speak on Tiger Direct is a website where they actually own a bunch of entities, like I think 80 plus entities across the interwebs. But essentially, they're using Couchbase